Yesterday, we just finished up the Mexican American War, which was a rousing victory for whom? The United States won big time. And what were the fruits? What did America reap from that war? What did America gain? California, a bunch of new land. Where? Nice and loud. Out in the West, yeah. What is today the American Southwest. States like Arizona and Colorado and New Mexico and parts of Nevada and California. Okay, so we got what we wanted. All right. So, but then we mentioned this guy, David Wilmot. Once he kind of stirs up the pot and wants to say that all this new land that was recently acquired out of the Mexican-American War is going to be forever free. Well, this amendment, the proviso, it does not pass, but it does kick up and create a lot of even more tension between the factions of pro-slavery and anti-slavery, abolition. Okay, so in 1848, there's a presidential election. Who won the election of 1844? Who was the president the entire time during all this mess with Mexico? James K. Polk. Why doesn't he run? Well, his body was pretty much broken from overwork. He suffered from chronic diarrhea. Probably suffered from what you see, ulcerative colitis. Okay, and when I mean suffered like 15 times a day going to the restroom. Okay, bad. All right. So he pledged himself to only serve a single term. So he only serves one term. And the Democrats turned to a new person in the form of Lewis Cass. Lewis Cass, veteran of the War of 1812. Father of this idea of popular sovereignty. You ever heard of popular sovereignty? He believed that popular sovereignty was going to be the cure-all or panacea. You see this word here on the board? I got it written on the board. Panacea. You guys know what panacea means? You could also call it like the magic pill or a miraculous cure. That's what a panacea means. So what is popular sovereignty going to miraculously cure? The problem of slavery. All right? And what is the big problem with slavery as far as the government's concerned? Is it the evil and immorality of treating people in bondage? No. What is the problem with slavery as far as the government is concerned in 1848? That's right. It's the balance of power in the United States Congress between slave states and free states. All right? So how is popular sovereignty going to cure this problem? Well, what popular sovereignty is it allows for a sovereign people, the people who reside in a territory, to determine for themselves the status of slavery. They're going to use democracy, the most basic form of government, like the basis of our government, and allow the people who reside there to vote and decide. If most people there want it, then it'll exist. If most people there don't want it, then it won't exist. We don't need to have any Missouri Compromise lines that draw imaginary lines on lines of latitude. If the people want it, they can have it. If they don't want it, they don't have it. And whatever happens in Congress, happens in Congress. Sound logical? Yeah, it sounds logical. Is it going to work? Absolutely not. In fact, you could make the argument that popular sovereignty causes even more bloodshed. All right, and you'll see that as we continue on. All right, so we got the election of 1848. You got the Whigs. They choose this hero of the Mexican-American War, Zachary Taylor. The Democrats have Lewis Cass, and then a new party called the Free Soiler Party turns to old Martin Van Ruin. And He wasn't even put on the ticket in many states. He did get a few uh, popular votes, but he did not receive a single electoral vote. And pretty convincingly, Zachary Taylor defeats Lewis Cass. Um, so Zachary Taylor takes over, and the entire nation is about to change forever before he's even inaugurated. Okay, because of something that is found in one of our territories, and what is found in 1848, gold, and that begins the California Gold Rush. And the discovery of gold on the American River near Sutter's Mill, California, early in 1848, blows the whole cover off of really America. You ever heard that song, "Oh Susanna"? Okay, that's a song about the California Gold Rush. And people began to tear frantically into the streams and river valleys of California. A fortunate few people do strike it rich. They find a lot of gold, and they become very, very wealthy. But the majority of the people, all they find are blisters on their hands. That's instead of nuggets in their pocket. Like this gentleman, working countless hours, panning for gold that's not really there. Okay, there was gold there. There's still gold there, if you can find it. It's just not, imagine like, hey, there's gold in Sophia, in the Soak Creek. And so all the people in Sophia start mining it, and then all the people from Beckley come, and all the people from Charlotte, and all the people from West Virginia come. I'm pretty soon, the population of Sophia is over 1 million people. That's kind of how cities like California grew, or San Francisco grew. All right, and we're gonna look at that as we talk about this. So, gold fever is what this is called, and for many people, it was more deadly than regular fevers. And usually, gold fever was followed by actual real fevers, as you get thousands of people living in the same place without sewer systems and places to go to the restroom. Disease spreads very rapidly. All right, so there were a lot of people that did strike it rich, and the majority of those people were not the miners. They were the people that owned the restaurants, the people that did the miners' laundry, the people who sold shovels and picks and pans, and people who owned brothels, people that owned the bars and saloons. Those are the people that were striking it rich. Those were the most reliable profits made because some of the miners, they'd find some gold, and they'd want to spend it, try to keep chasing it. So the inpouring, literally overnight, of tens of thousands of people into the Golden State completely overwhelmed the California government. California was not even a state when the gold rush happened. Now, the gold was discovered in 1848, but the gold rush technically begins in 1849. All right, the 49ers, you ever heard like the football team, the 49ers in San Francisco? Their name comes from the gold rush, okay, the 1849ers. So California was not made a state until 1850. That's how fast it grew. California literally belonged to Mexico in 1847. Gold is found in 1848. Gold rush 1849, becomes a state in 1850. That's how fast California grew. Went from not even being America to one of the stars on our flag. So needless to say, the government that existed in California was overwhelmed with this massive influx of people. And a lot of these incoming people were not, let's say, choir boys. They were lawless people, outlaws, maybe even people who are criminals who are kind of on the lam. trying to get rich before so they can evade the law. And usually these men were accompanied by virtueless women. So, needless to say, an outburst of crime inevitably resulted from the presence of so many miscreants and outcasts. So, whenever the crime does occur in California, you just pick up the phone and call the police, right? In 1849, you just go pick up the phone and call the police? Pick up the telegraph, right? Call the police. What police? They're like, imagine like if this happened in Sofia. All right, we got like, 3 police officers, right? And there's like, 2,000 residents in Sofia? 2,500? Now I want you to imagine, over a period of 1 year, you go from 2,000 residents to 500,000 residents. And then in another year, 1.5 million residents. You think 3 police officers can even make a dent in this? All the while, Sofia is located in a place that's not even a state in our country. So they're getting no resources and no help. Sound like a place you want to go? It would have been in 1849. People kept coming for the chasing the get rich quick. That's something that is purely American. We always are looking for the deal, right? Always want the deal. Always want to get a good sale and get rich quick. Always looking for a scheme to try to make it. This is just another example of that. And people will literally risk their fortunes and their lives to go do this. So when you do, so let's say some crime is happening. What do you do? Like, let's say that you're mining and some other miner comes in and starts, like, you need to leave. I'm taking your land. Like, this is now mine. I'm going to mine it, and you are going to leave, or I'm going to shoot you. Well, what do? You shoot them before they shoot you. Vigilante justice. That's how the judicial system, which was non-existent in California, was. Vigilante justice. You do something wrong to me, I'm going to do something wrong to you back. Okay? So, lots of lawless killings were going on in California, and particularly in San Francisco, in the time period at the beginning of the gold rush in 1848 through 1856. Because even when California becomes a state, it takes a while to establish some bureaucracy. Okay? But California was encouraged to become a state by President Taylor. This happened during his presidency. They obviously already had the population because you only needed 60,000 people. They drafted a constitution, and in California's constitution, they're going to use popular sovereignty, and that excluded slavery. So there was going to be no slavery in California. So California would thus be admitted as a free state. Okay? California is a very interesting place, and we'll talk more about it throughout our history. Still an interesting place. Okay? You ever heard of this? The Underground Railroad? Choo-choo. It's like a train that goes underground, right? Like a tunnel. Huh? No. Has nothing to do with trains at all. Okay? Railroads were a semi-new technology that were vastly sweeping across the United States, and it's just kind of a nickname for a secret system, a secret organization that helped escaped slaves flee to Canada. And the time period that we're talking about here is like 1850. And the United States South of 1850 was doing very well. It was relatively well off. It enjoyed more than its fair share of our nation's leadership. It had seated in the White House the hero Zachary Taylor, who was a Virginia-born slave-owning planter from Louisiana. Even though he's from Virginia, he claimed to be from Louisiana. It boasted a majority in the cabinet, the president's cabinet, and on the Supreme Court. Things were looking good for slavery in the South. And, even if they were outnumbered in the White House, the South had equality in the Senate. The South had equality to at least neutralize the North in terms of representation. Cotton fields were expanding. Cotton prices were pretty high. Things were looking good. So, yet the South was still very deeply worried about holding on to its way of life, its culture. And there were 15 slave states and 15 free states. But when California in 1850 is admitted, it will destroy the delicate equilibrium because California is going to be admitted as a free state. And this balance could potentially, forever upset the equilibrium. And potential slave territory in the South was running short. So agitation occurs once California is admitted. So, and the fate of California, like once California went free, it was kind of like, well, what about the rest of this territory in that area? Is it also going to be free? It kind of sets a precedent. So it really brought a lot of fear to people in the South. So many Southerners were also very aggravated and angered by the agitation from Northern abolitionists over the abolition of slavery in our nation's capital. Before 1850, slavery, Washington, D.C. was slave territory. It's not a state, but it was slave territory. You could own a slave there. You could buy a slave there. Slave auctions occurred there. It was a slave area. The Capitol and the White House were built by slaves, okay? So the district, but many people in the North thought it was an ugly sight for foreign diplomats to come to the United States and see flesh being sold on the open market in our nation's capital. So they really began a movement to try to make our nation's capital free, abolition. Okay? That's one thing that aggravated Southerners. Another thing that was even more disagreeable to the South was the loss of runaway slaves. Slaves are very expensive, about the equivalent to the price of a used car today. So if you went out and bought a used car, that's about the price of a slave. They're very expensive. A significant portion of the South's money and capital was tied up in slavery. So I want you to just imagine, like, your car just runs away and it's gone. You just lost all your money. It's not coming back. So, and what really angered the South is that when their slaves, which they considered to be their property, ran away, they were being assisted by organizations that were based in the North to help their property flee from them. And this organization became known as the Underground Railroad. And they used the people that worked on the Underground Railroad, like Harriet Tubman, that's whose picture's here. They used the lingo of the railroads, even though they very seldom were on a train. Okay, like it was a series of stations which freed slaves were taken to and kept overnight, so they would have a secret place to sleep, and then they would, or during the day they could sleep and then move at night, and it was all done, in secret. So Harriet Tubman's probably the greatest conductor of the Underground Railroad, making 19 trips into the South. 19 trips. And rescued more than 300 slaves. She earned the title of Moses. Why would they call her Moses? What did Moses do? Hey, in Egypt. Very good. So, because of her success and the success of other conductors on the Underground Railroad, Southerners were demanding a new fugitive slave law. They wanted it to be put into law that if a northern person encountered a runaway slave, that they would be compelled to report them or turn them in. And it was estimated that the South was losing about 1,000 runaways a year out of its total of 4 million slaves in the year 1850. So essentially what you're seeing here is more and more tension. More and more tension is emerging. Okay? So this tension continues to grow and continues to grow and continues to grow until eventually there's going to be a break or a snap. And before this snap occurs this time, who's our favorite American that enters and always settles things? Henry Clay, the great compromiser. He enters along with the help of John C. Calhoun and Daniel Webster. They're still around. They've been there for 40 years. They're all very old, elderly. But enter Henry Clay, and then at the year of 73 years old, from the state of Kentucky, he proposed a skillfully defended series of compromises. Altogether, all these compromises are part of what we call now the Compromise of 1850. It's not just one thing, it's several things, and I'm going to tell you what they are. Okay? Okay, so the Compromise of 1850. California will be admitted as a free state. That is why California is admitted as a free state, because of that is one of the compromises. We allow California to enter as a free state. So who does that benefit? The North. All right, this is a compromise. It's a give and take. All right. All right. The remainder of the land acquired from Mexico will be formed into territories. The Utah Territory and the New Mexico Territory. And these territories will be allowed to determine the status of slavery by the use of popular sovereignty. The people in these territories will get to choose for themselves. Whom does that benefit? The South, because is there a chance that slavery can exist? Yes. They even go so far as to break these territories up again and again, so they have more opportunities for slavery. Okay? I mean, obviously, this is like Nevada, Utah, parts of Colorado, and this is New Mexico and Arizona. All right? So that benefits the South. Okay, another part. I mean, this map's not great for this, but Texas didn't look like this before 1850. This was Texas. You see how like weird shape it goes all the way up to here? You see that? That was Texas at the end of the Mexican-American War. That's Texas in 1848. Well, there were some claims going on that other territories, this was disputed by New Mexico and Texas. Well, Texas is going to give up some of that territory and make it as part of the New Mexico territory. Okay? It was a disputed claim for whatever reasons. Whom does that benefit? They got to think hard on this one. Taking land away from Texas and putting it into unorganized territory. Benefits the North. Why?
Because that makes more land able to
All right, if it's a part of Texas, it's definitely slave. If it becomes part of this territory, there's a chance it could be free. So that benefits the North. Okay. Texas will receive $10 million for compensation. That obviously benefits Texas, which would be a southern state. So it's a concession to the South. So for all that land they lost, weird panhandle that went up to like up here, like part of Idaho, You imagine Texas being all the way up in Idaho today? $10 million for all that. Okay? A final two parts to the compromise. The capital of the United States, Washington, D.C., slavery will be abolished. I'm sorry, the slave trade will be abolished. Slavery exists. The slave trade is abolished. So no more slave auctions in the nation's capital, but you can still own slaves, but no purchasing of slaves. Okay? The buying and selling, restricted. The ownership is not. All right? So who does that benefit? Any kind of abolition of slavery or slave aspects of it would benefit who? Yeah, free states. And then the final component is there is going to be a more stringent fugitive slave law. A more stringent fugitive slave law. The Fugitive Slave Law was also called the Bloodhound Bill. Why would it be called the Bloodhound Bill? Yeah, that's what you use when somebody's escaped. Like you see an old movie where somebody's escaped from prison, they get the bloodhounds and chase after them. Now, they're not necessarily using bloodhounds after they've been gone for a while, but at the initial point they do. But what the point of this is it turns Northerners into the bloodhounds. The Northerners become required to report it. And then, if you are a slave that is fled, you could not, you would be denied access to a lot of parts of American government. Even like you see, these are some actual bills that were created, like handbills that would be posted to give information about how, fugitive slaves, the slave hunters among us, be on your guard. Even people who were freed slaves were like terrified because they were starting to round these people up. If you were black, they were just like, hey, let's see your papers. If you didn't have them on you or present them quick enough, they would literally take you back to the South and put you back into slavery, even if you were already freed. So the Fugitive Slave Law, the Bloodhound Bill, was a pretty upsetting aspect to the North, needless to say. Okay? But as far as the entire compromise itself, who got the better deal? The North, very good, very good. So the North clearly got the better deal. California, y'all. California, right? What's the largest state in the country today? California, by population. Like, it's enormous. So our Congress is based on it's apportioned out by population. How many representatives does the state of West Virginia have in the House of Representatives? We have three. Three. How many does California have? 53. 53. They have 53 of the 435. California is extremely large and it grows fast. Okay, extremely fast. So, also, when California enters as a free state, it permanently unbalances the balance of power between free states and slave states. Okay, and it sets a precedent with popular sovereignty as well. Okay. Also, our nation's capital. This is where the action happens. We're beginning to see a movement of abolition of restrictions on slavery in our nation's capital. This is where the laws are made. So that's also setting a precedent for the future. Okay. Now the fugitive slave law is terrible. Like, it was absolutely horrible. It stirred up a storm of opposition. Freeing slaves could not testify on their own behalf. They were denied jury trials and very harsh practices. So, and people like William Lloyd Garrison and abolitionists that were working on the Underground Railroad, if they were caught helping somebody, the fines were extremely heavy and the jail sentences were pretty long. Okay, that's another part of this to try to discourage white people from helping them. Okay, so pretty serious stuff. Okay. We'll keep going. All right, so doom and defeat for the Whigs. Didn't last very long. The Whig Party. It's gone now, right? The Whig Party begins to fail after the election of 1852. And in the Democratic Convention in 1852, they nominate Franklin Pierce. Franklin Pierce is from New Hampshire. Pierce was weak, indecisive, youngish, handsome. He's a good-looking guy. Friendly to get along with. You could call him convivial, like pleasant to be around. Much like you guys, right? Pleasant to be around. But he's a pro-Southern Northerner. He was acceptable to slavery in the Democratic Party. He endorsed the Compromise of 1850, Fugitive Slave Act and all. And he's a pro-slavery Northerner. The Compromise had things that benefited both sides. He liked it all because he's from the North, but he's pro-Southern. So he liked it all. Odd character. Not to spoil it, one of our worst presidents ever. One of them. Okay. And he goes up against old Fuss and Feathers. That was his nickname, Winfield Scott, who was a hero of probably one of the most able American generals of his generation. Hero of the Mexican-American War. And the Democrats I always like the campaign slogans. And Pierce's was way better. He's like, we poked them in 44, we'll pierce them in 52. Like Polk, James K. Polk, we poked them in 44. I guess I like that more than you guys. I don't know. But that was his, and it was a very, as you can see by the numbers here, it was an easy victory, and mainly it's not because Franklin Pierce was that much better. It's that the Whigs were hopelessly split. Many of the Whigs were anti-slavery in the North, but the Whig Party of the South is pro-slavery. And so the party is splitting their votes apart. Whereas Franklin Pierce, he's like, hey, it's all good. It's good politically to get votes. It's bad in practice, okay, because it doesn't work. When you try to appease everybody, you're going to fail, okay? You have to have your platform and stick to it. So he wins the election, but, he goes down as one of the worst presidents ever. One of, probably worst top 5. Okay, so but the election of 1852 was fraught with frightening significance. It was the effective end of the Whig Party. They were just too disorganized. Imagine you're split, and the issue you're split over is human bondage. That's a pretty divisive issue. Okay, the people who are for it and the people who are against it hate each other. Okay, obviously they're getting ready to murder each other over it. All right, so the Whigs' demise kind of shows the worrisome rise of sectionalism, sectional political alignments, and that the sections would be North and South. All right? Got that? Okay, let's go back to Mexico a little bit here. So, one of the things that America was hoping to accomplish was a transcontinental railroad. And so there was a lot of things over what to do, but how to do it. Feasible land transportation was imperative. We still got that Henry Clay's American system. We want to improve our infrastructure. and people came up with all kinds of ideas as to how to make how are we going to get stuff from this new awesome place of California with the Pacific Ocean into new awesome places like over here, and then all the way to the Mississippi River. So we need to come up with some transportation from here to here. One thought was a railroad. One thought was like, we're going to go to Arabia and bring back like 10,000 camels. Yeah, I'm not kidding. And like we'll have like a camel cavalcade all the way across the desert because camels can survive in the desert, right? That was like proposed in Congress. Like we're going to go buy camels with American money. Fortunately, that one didn't work out too good. So obviously, the only real solution here is a transcontinental railroad. All right, where should it be built? We're going to build it from Los Angeles to the east, or are we going to build it in San Francisco to the east? What's the difference here with building it from San Francisco to the east and Los Angeles to the east? What's the main difference here? One is a northern route and one is a southern route. Do you think they're going to argue over which one it should be? Yeah, argue a lot. So railroad promoters both north and south had all kind of plans for how to do it, but the estimated cost was going to be so great. But at the time, you have a lot of southern leadership in the government, including the President of the United States, he was a pro-Southern Northerner, so he would go along with it. And they wanted to do a southern route from here to here. The only problem is this land right here did not belong to us. This land I'm circling, which we own today, who did it belong to? Mexico. Because if you go up here, this is like the Rocky Mountains. Not great for making a railroad through. But here, it's all desert, okay? Desert. So, the President of the United States deems that another chunk of Mexico is now needed and desirable. So, and also, this is the best place to send a railroad through. It's the easiest and the cheapest. So, the President of the United States sends a ambassador to Mexico named Jefferson Davis. You ever heard of him? He and a man by the name of James Gadsden, a prominent South Carolina railroad man, go to Mexico and they find Santa Anna still there, in power for the sixth and last time, and as usual in need of money. And Gadsden negotiates a treaty with him in 1853 to purchase this piece of land for $10 million. For the purpose of what? Why are we buying it? For a railroad, a southern route for the railroad. What happened the last time we sent somebody to Mexico to try to buy some land? Huh? They ignored us, and what happened as a result? I guess they learned their lesson this time. Just sell. What was he going to do? He was strapped. So $10 million, we bought this. Really, it's just desert. Well, now it's like, Tucson, Arizona, and Yuma. Pretty neat places. Okay? All right, so with the Gadsden purchase, it now enabled the South to claim a coveted railroad route, and the southern track would be easier to build because the mountains were less high, and because it was just going to be cheaper to do through this territory. Plus, it's going to be cheaper because you only got to go from California, which was a state. You only got to go through this much territory that's unorganized. That's it. Because once you get to Texas, you're in another state. If you build a northern route, this is all unorganized territory all the way until you get to Illinois. And so it's much, much harder to protect this land and keep it safe. It's not organized. Okay, there's no government really established here. You got territorial government, but that's it. Here, it's a much shorter area of land which has to be protected, and then there's resources to protect it. Okay, so federal troops would be it's much easier to protect it with federal troops in a smaller area of land protected from Indians marauding tribes of Native Americans who don't appreciate you destroying their hunting lands and building railroads. But America didn't care about that. Okay, so next time we'll talk about some new stuff in the Transcontinental Railroad, some schemes. And you see what we're doing? We're building a bridge toward the Civil War, which is coming rapidly.